So go back to ownership for you for a sec. So when you're like sitting there going from I'm going to own a company, what are the things that what's going through your mind of why? I'm curious. Like, okay, I've got an opportunity to own a company. I would like to own a company. What is that like in that moment? What does that represent to you? What do you think it represents to you in that moment? Curious.
Land ahoy, mateys! The archipelago awaits.
In the past, I would say it was something that was more glorified.
Yep.
Like it was more the title, the CEO. Like you look at successful business owners in the media, and they're like idolized.
Mm-hmm.
They're these people that you want to chase, and they're always on the news. But today, as I like grew, I would say the reason why I want to own it today is because I have control of shaping and molding something that I can match to the values of myself,
Yep.
and then I can match the environment around me. So I have control on the direct environment around me.
Yep.
So then I can build myself this place that it's almost like an extension of myself,
Yep.
where I can put my values, my goals into this business, and then I can take that and I can then project it out.
Yep.
And then it gives me the opportunity then to be able to like pull in like-minded people, to be able to work on a goal, to be able to create that community.
Yep.
And to me, that's what owning the business means to me now. But on the backside of that, it's like, well, yes, then after that you have like all the accountability that then flows out from those things that you artificially take on because you're pushing in that direction. And kind of like how we talked in a business, the waves keep coming and keep coming. That's where like this big question of ownership really came to my mind. Was the business is at 10 people right now. So for us to be able to grow past 10 people, like us as the owners, we have to give control. So we have to give up control. We can't control everything after this point. Like we have to have more people in the company that have control. And then ultimately for us, we want them to be able to take on ownership, right? So that's where this big question of ownership came into question, because it's like, well, if we're giving up more control, how do we then give out ownership, or how do we get people to take ownership?
Yeah, and in that context, when you say ownership, you're not necessarily talking about, hey, there'll be shares of the company. You're talking about how do they act like an owner? In other words, in their roles, they would take as if they owned it, even though whether they physically own a share or not. That's what you're saying. How do they take ownership and pride in that role and that outcome?
That's right. It's the responsibility. It's like when I was describing at the start, it's almost like that extension of myself.
Yep.
So then what I thought about is like almost breaking up ownership into 3 different levels, where the first level of ownership I feel like is renting. The middle level is it's ownership itself, and the last level is mine. This is mine. So the easy example that like I was thinking of was a house. So it's physical, it's easy to picture in your head. And I look at myself back in university. So my 3rd year university, we had this old house, and there was 5 guys. So there was a kitchen upstairs, there was a kitchen downstairs, there was a half duplex, and there was 5 guys living in it. Well, it only cost us $250 a month each to rent, so it was dirt cheap. But by the end of it, we almost needed a combine to cut the grass. So it was like, yeah, we were renting that place. We didn't do any damage per se, but it wasn't like we were proud of it.
Yep.
It wasn't like it was an extension of us. We're like, hey, look at this. Where that middle level of ownership is, I think of when my girlfriend bought her house. It's like, okay, well now the grass is cut nicely. We actually built the yard. We built the fence. We placed things in the house where we wanted them. You know, now you have to learn, okay, well, we have to change the furnace filter, once a year, and you have to learn these little maintenance things to keep that thing that you care about in place.
Yep.
But then that last level, that ownership that I call mine, that's when you really personalize it. That's when you take it to the next level and you put that painting on the wall. Or if I think of my office or your office, you have those little knickknacks, those little things that like are an extension of your personality. So then when we're thinking about this in the context of the business too, it's like, if I was just given a task, am I renting that task? Am I renting that ownership? Or am I taking on that ownership? Or is that ownership an extension of myself?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because if you sit down also, it's sometimes in my mind is it, sometimes you see this with people, is they sort of, I'll call it pass through a company. And I don't mean over long periods of time, but they're just there and then they're gone. And so to me, that sort of aligns with more of the renting is whether they know about the company, buy into the company, they're just kind of there filling a space and then they go. They come and they go, if that makes sense. And those people cycle through. Then you get to that next level where you start to see that they want to be there longer term, to the point they understand the business more, they do better contributions, and they're steady parts of the company. And then ultimately, then finally, that there's this third one in my mind is people that go above and beyond. You can see that they want to learn, they want to go even further, they want to take ownership of their role, they want to lead people. So those ones there you see inside the company, and those ones. And I think me and you have talked about this is, how do you take from one group, how do you move them along that spectrum? And sometimes I don't know if they can, if it's just, so to the point about the five guys in the thing in the wild lawn, you know, you always see movies or hear about people that in their 25, 30, 35, 40, they're still the same person all along. So is it what changed? And I don't know if it's inside of the people that make it do that, or is it, oh no, the company never gave the opportunity, that's why they drift, right? So I call them the suitcases. They go from company to company to company, right? That makes sense. So how do they sort of land and get sort of in there and start to move around positively in the company?
Yeah, and when I'm thinking about it and applying it to myself, like I picture, like, when was a part of my life where I just rented ownership, and then how did I transition past that? And the story that comes to my mind was I was an intern doing project management at a facility that produced French fries, actually. And what happened is there was this Area 6, and I get a phone call from the supervisor of Area 6, and you could tell there's some tension in his voice. They were just getting furniture delivered into this office area, and the contractors had their tool belts on. They were sitting on the tables. They were scratching up all of the desks and all the chairs. So the supervisor gets me on the phone, and he says, I need you to print out a piece of paper, a sign that says if anyone is caught sitting on furniture, you're escorted immediately off site and you're not welcome back. And I want you to put that on every single wall inside of Area 6. So I'm like, okay, no problem, I can do that. So I was creating those signs, and then as I had the mock-up, I called over the safety guy and I said, hey, safety guy, come have a look at this. He said, it looks perfect. The only thing I would change is put the supervisor's name on there and the supervisor's phone number. He said having a name and a phone number like gives more punch behind the message, and people are going to take it more seriously. But I was hesitant. I was like, I don't know if the supervisor's going to be pretty happy about that. And this was me renting the ownership. So it was me renting ownership from the safety guy, renting ownership from the supervisor, and trying to meet in the middle and try to like appease these two people. So I put his name on there, and I went and I plastered all of these signs around Area 6, everywhere. So later that day, I was walking through the plant, and I saw that supervisor. He was probably 50 feet away, and he was with a client, actually. He was with a guy from the city. And I could see when he made eye contact with me, the color of his face went from white to beet red. And I could hear him yelling across the facility. He goes, you trying to make me look bad? And he gets right up in my face, and he's angry. He's like, you're trying to make me look bad? These guys loved me. Now they hate me. And then I'm renting my ownership, and I'm pointing at the safety guy. Well, I'm the safety guy.
Deflect.
The safety guy told me to do this, right? So I'm renting ownership in that situation because I don't think I felt like I had control or felt like I had the ownership to make a decision that was like impactful in that situation.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I could just imagine the look on his face. Yeah, I think in each one of them, it's everybody. Yeah, I think, when we're in those roles, it's a tough situation. Like, so, do you do it this way? Do you not put the signs up? Do you put not the signs up without his name? And how everybody also deflects, But also inside of that, when I think about ownership, when we talk about ownership in our minds, I don't care if it's a physical one, your house, I don't care if it's in a role, I don't care if it's ownership in a company. It is also where you actually are the responsibility you take. In other words, you're going to make a decision, and that decision you're going to stand by. So the real interesting one there is if you had all three people in that one spot at that moment, is the supervisor taking ownership? You know, is the safety guy taking ownership? Are you taking ownership? Or it's just like, well, no, he told me to. He told me to. Who told them to?
We all would have pointed at each other,
Right,
and it
yeah.
would have just made a
Yeah.
circle.
But it was very interesting when you said the supervisor said, "Are you trying to make me look bad?" So in other words, he got some feedback from somebody. Somebody, they used to love me, now they don't. So somebody must say, "We don't love you anymore," or gave him some choice words, versus him going, "Yeah, no, I put it up. That's what I want." Like,
Exactly. It's important to me that
Right.
this furniture gets in
Yeah.
because our client needs
Yeah.
it.
So it's very interesting when we talk about ownership. It's this idea of, are we in those roles to be liked? So back to your thing about when we think about the big owners in the world, whether it's Musk or any of these ones here, is it they want to be liked, or they want to be respected? So because those two don't go hand in hand necessarily, right? So let me give you an example. If that supervisor puts that up there, he wants to say, respect my role, respect the stuff that we're doing here. Well, then there's the people that want to hang out there and have lunch on the table. They're not going to particularly like him, maybe, because it ruined their little chance to do it. So think about when we think about ownership, and sometimes that's why we avoid that, is because of the fact that we want more people to like us than even at the sort of the cost of our respect, with respect their eyes, or our self-respect to ourselves, or do we want people to respect us? So what was very interesting with that one there is people would respect that he did it. They wouldn't like that he did it, but it was more important because that's what he pointed out. He didn't come up and saying, "Thank you for allowing people to respect me." Instead, he said, "They're not going to like me anymore." So
Yeah, exactly.
interesting.
And I think that transitions into that second level of ownership that we talked about. It's that I have this goal, right? Like the bigger goal of the project is to build the facility, to get the facility up and running for the client.
Yep.
So if that's the ownership, if that's the goal that we're trying to achieve, then that's what we're going to stand by.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to do.
Yep.
But like you said, going from ownership to the third level, which is mine, which is an extension of yourself, which is your values.
Yep.
Well, what did the supervisor value the most?
Yep.
And like you pointed out, he values being liked.
Yep.
That's really important to him, right? I bet if he was the person behind building the facility, or if that facility, that area was that extension of himself that matches the values, he'll probably stand behind what he's saying more because it is that extension of himself.
Yeah. I was thinking that, like, imagine in that area if they were sitting on the furniture, and think about, those moving blankets. If they put just moving blankets and people could sit on it, then there's a compromise where, hey, look, we can accommodate you, and we can take ownership and protect the sort of the items inside too. But it's very interesting how quick we come to put up the sign. But as soon as we do, then the question is, do we really take ownership of the results of that? And so to me, that's a big part of it, right? Where to the point is, you talked about yourself in that, you said, well, as soon as he came to you, you sort of tilted your head and looked over the safety guy. So it's, in other words, you can see how this could continually go in this circle where everybody's pointing to the next person versus somebody just stopping and saying, no, that's what I chose to do.
Yeah, and I think you brought up actually a really good point. Is like, if one of those values of himself is to say, please people, or to be able to like be friends with the contractors he's working with, then you're right. Then you take in those values and you find those unique solutions that match yourself.
100%.
Because if it's the moving blankets,
Yeah.
well, that matches both parties, and then
100%.
that matches your values.
100%.
Because then you can find unique solutions that then give you more
Yeah.
of that feeling of ownership.
Yeah, and to me, that supervisor, just from the gut, tells me that he loved the title of a supervisor, but he didn't love the idea that, what am I going to get, and then we get the that respect, or more importantly for him was that they liked. So it was interesting. I had my brother works out at one of the big plants out in Tabor and has worked there over 40 years. And he phoned me probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and he said, "Yeah," I said, "Ask what's going on in this world." And he said, "Well, I've got an opportunity to be a superintendent." So really, the top 5 or 6 people in the company kind of idea. And thought immediately, I'm like, wow, that's great, that's exciting. Like all this stuff was running through my mind. It's great. He's worked hard and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, you could sense that he wasn't at the end of the phone. He wasn't in the same spot. And I said, "What's up?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know if I'm going to take it." And I said, "Excuse me, like, what are you talking about?" Like, because to me, I'm thinking, well, you always do that. It's leadership. And then he pointed out, he said, as soon as you do that, then the people that he's been around view him differently and their relationships all change. So a real practical example that if I take this role, I alienate myself. So again, going back to even that supervisor, that's really what he's saying. He's saying, I like the role, but I want to be liked. And if I put my foot down and define it, then I'm going to actually wake up and actually understand what part of ownership is. Part of ownership is you have to make some decisions, and they're not always liked by everybody, but they're better for the whole. They could even be better for the people that aren't liking you, but they just don't maybe have the scope or understanding. So it's a very tough. So that ownership one, that's that sort of dichotomy. The thing that they're struggling inside with is that respect versus like, because
Yeah, and I also wonder if time frame also plays into those decisions, right? Because if you're making a decision for that immediate result, or that immediate, say, alienation of being with the people or being like outside of that group, because the other perspective that comes to my mind is, well, now you actually have the opportunity to create that environment for that group.
Yeah.
Right? Because if that's part of your values, is like creating that environment, which that's part of my values, so that's why I think of it this way, is, well, now I can actually hear and listen to the people, and I've done that job, and now I can actually make the community better, right? But it's not perceived that way at the start.
Nope.
And you have to make those hard decisions,
Exactly.
and then you have to get alienated a little bit if you want to then be able to make change.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's part of ownership, is making decisions to have change.
Yep.
But that change is that perspective of where you want to take things in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we both played hockey, so I just wanted to remember, I've never asked you this, but just, you ever remember being on a team and the coaches come in and there's no captain or assistants yet, right?
Yep.
And the coach is going to come in and they're going to assign the captain assistants. You remember this? I remember this used to seem to be a big deal, right?
Yeah, you'd be in the dressing
You'd
room,
be in the dressing
you'd wait
room.
around.
Yeah, you wait
You'd have
around.
your guess on who it's going
Right,
to be.
who's going to be, right?
Yeah.
And then they do it, and they give the captain, they give the assistant. Now, I would say at that exact moment, everybody applauds or everybody's happy, but deep down, that alienation and that isolation actually is happening temporarily. And then over time, then they prove to be the right captain, the right assistants, and then it dies down and it's fully functioning. But in that first moment, it alienates the room for temporarily.
Absolutely.
Well, I thought it would be Johnny and it's Chucky or whatever, like
And there's some jealousy.
jealousy and all that kind of stuff, right? And so you can see that in that play, but because of the proximity of the game over time, that subsides. And again, as long as the captain doesn't be, arrogant Johnny running around, well then, but if they're normal people and can bring it back, then the whole team comes together. Or if they don't believe it, then it never comes together. So that's the same as in business when you sit down and think about those things. When you get to the supervisor, management, whatever, executive level, all those things, there's some of that dynamic at play, and it's isolating at first, but then how do you feather and bring that back so that people respect you in your role, understand that you are doing the right thing, the thing that will help everybody, right? So,
And I think that's a big part of, I think, that goes from like level 2 to level 3, is that conviction and that belief in yourself. Yeah. Because if you just got announced to be the captain in the room and everyone's looking at you, like, are you renting being captain?
Yeah.
And there's going to be a part where you feel the imposter syndrome,
100%,
right? Because it's a new experience. Mm-hmm. But building that conviction and that belief in yourself, saying, you know what, I want to be the captain of this team and I'm going to lead and I'm going to show how it's done.
Yeah.
and that conviction is needed to take ownership and then to go from ownership to mine. And that's something that I want to talk about, how you can almost encourage, or can you encourage people to take on that ownership? Because the other thing that I want to also kind of point out too is that we're already taking ownership in parts of our lives. Like there's parts of our lives every day that we can point out if we just reflect on, that we can say, okay, I'm renting this ownership. This is actually me taking ownership, or like, this is mine. Like I want that conviction. So is there a way that you can set up to allow people to take more ownership of X?
Well, I believe, I'd have to believe that like we try to create an environment for it, but I think people just rise or they don't rise in some respects. Like to your point about the thing is that if they can see some steps, there's safe steps. If we can really control that isolation and make it, then that's thing. But a lot of times what you do is you sort of put together people in the room, and then just naturally, for whatever reason, if there's 4 of us in the room and we're doing X and it doesn't matter what we're doing, pretty soon, if we were put our ego and everything aside, we recognize who the leader is. The person that is leading, that is taking charge, is doing more, is laying it out, is conscious of the rest of the group in terms of their involvement. So again, to that captain idea, if the captain, they get assigned a captain and they just, go the opposite direction, well, then they're not bringing everybody along. So I think that we can create environments to start to test that. But I don't know if you can say, I'm going to randomly go into a room of 4 people without knowing and throw a dart at one of them and say that person will become the leader, and I will mold, shape, and everything, and they will become the leader. I'm not sure that that's the way it really works. So I think a lot of times when you say that we have ownership in our life, a lot of those are just instinctively you do, right? So for whatever reason, since I was a kid, like I had a strange thing. I ran into an old guy from the old neighborhood. I hadn't seen him in 25 years, let's call it that. And I ran into him in a building, and he was going in a different direction. I said, my office was in that building, and I said, well, when you're done, why don't you come for a visit? And so anyways, he came for a visit. Hey, how you doing? All that kind of stuff. And then, so then I wanted to tell him, we had a big team at that time. We had a 15, one of the biggest teams in Canada of that type. And so I was just telling him, and I wasn't doing it to brag. I was just trying to tell him, like, things are going to good there. And I said, yeah, we got one of the biggest teams in Canada. And he said, of course you do. And I caught me off guard. Of course I do. He goes, you're always like that. You're that since you're 12 years old. We'd play street hockey. You'd be the guy that organized it. And you did, that was naturally what you did. You always could piece those things together. So he could see it from a different angle, and now happens to be, I'm just doing the same thing in business. So that's really what you're doing. When you sit down and think about, there's a group of 10 or 15, you take leadership because you're trying to get output and doing that naturally. And I'm not doing it to say, hey, I'm the organizer of the street hockey game. It's just, I want the game to go. And so you just go ahead and do it. And next thing you know, you're the organizer. And so I think it's naturally that people, right? And you see it on, there's a million shows that you watch, like the Survivors or anything. They throw a whole bunch of random people, and you see some different people. They rise to the different occasion, and people view them that way. So I don't know how much we can manufacture that person, but we definitely can support them if we could recognize those people. But I don't know. Do you believe, like, just curious, if you took 4 random people that walked by this building, we put them, do we believe all 4 could be leaders? Question mark? Think about your friends and think about the people you know. Like,
yeah, I think the key thing that you said there was, like, you wanted the hockey game to start.
Yeah.
So you wanted to play the hockey game. So you said, hey guys, let's get together. Let's play the hockey game. Let's do this. Right? Because if I pulled, say, 4 people off the street and I put them inside of the business, like, the best thing that I could probably do is ask them, well, what do they want to do?
yeah.
And if they said, well, I just want to talk to people and hang out, like, okay, well, we need to find a productive place in the business for that. Because maybe that could be sales.
Yeah.
Or maybe that could be reception or administration if that's what they want to do. I want to talk to people. I want to get to know people. So I think I think it depends on the situation, on the person. But I do really think that you framed it nicely, that it's almost like it's like a simulation that you have to play out of what naturally happens or what natural qualities come out. Because I think you can like provide direction, and I think you can provide like some coaching and some insight. That's if the person wants to hear it or wants to change. And I think they can naturally kind of adjust. But I do think over time we fall back into the similar patterns that we naturally tend to gravitate towards. So if I'm always gravitating towards like being more isolated and working by myself, but I have this perception that leaders are people that are extroverts and stand in front of people and give big speeches, and I'm always pushing myself to try to get in those situations, well, then I think you're doing that person or you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're bending that natural tendency of yours instead of trying to use it as a strength. So I think I agree with you that you have to play out the situation, but I do think the key thing is, what does that person want to do? I think it's what are they naturally good at? Like, what is it something that they just naturally do for fun? Like, one of the questions that I love to ask during interviews is, it's Sunday, you have absolutely nothing planned for the day, you can do whatever you want. Like, what are some things that you would do? Because I think that frames that area that you want, that you take time and you go do. Because for myself, I would, like, Sunday morning, I wake up and I'm like, perfect, I want to have a coffee and I want to read a book. Like, to me, that's like so peaceful, and that's such a great way to start my day. But then it's like, why? So then I can ask, well, why do I want to read that book? Usually I'm learning about something. Usually I'm learning about programming or leadership or something about like finance, right? So then that tells you that natural inclination that person has. And I think if you can find those wants, then I think if you put them in that correct situation, I think they can be a leader. But I think if you have a situation and you just put in 10 people, it's that person that wants it that's just going to rise to the top.
100%. Yeah, and I find it like sort of, I call it inspiration and desperation. So I remember one of the things was that I was involved in played ball hockey, and every summer we'd have the thing, so we go to play. So anyways, it's, we walk in, it's supposed to be, the rink is supposed to be rented as part of the game. We all get to the door, well, the door's locked. And the guy that's supposed to be organizing it's there, and he's like, well, I don't know what's going on. And he's standing there, doesn't know what to do. And I'm like, well, I want to play again. It's this idea that I want to get it. So he's like, well, there's nothing I can do. And so I thought, screw that. So anyways, I went through, got the call, went to the end, found somebody who found somebody, got the person down to there and opened up the thing so we could play the game. And then it dawned on me that the guy that's organizing it really isn't doing any good. It's not that I think I'm the superstar organizer, but relative to him, I'm better. So desperation drives us to do it. So pretty soon I'm like, well, why don't I just do this? Because it doesn't seem to be getting done. And it's not that I said, I think I should be the leader of that. It wasn't any conscious. It was more like, just get the job done. This guy's not doing it. Well, I think I could organize people to get it done. And so it's very interesting that all of a sudden you wake up and you're the leader. And it's like, well, that wasn't my intent. I wasn't saying my desire is to become the leader today. My desire was to get an outcome. And since nobody's doing it, so it's like, we're in a plane, there's 4 of us, plane crashes, we're on a desert island, it's going to be dark in 2 or 3 hours. We know we need fire, we know we need wood, we know we need food, we know we need water. And if we're all stand there, and then somebody's going to say, hey, we should go do it. Okay, what do we need done? Okay, well, Wes, you can be the fire guy. And we divvy it up. We don't think about, we just go and we do it and we get it done. But it's who steps up and says that, and who's willing to, to be, I guess, vulnerable, but mainly more just to say, can I see the situation for what it is, and can we collectively see it and then paint that picture and move forward? Very similar to if you sit down and think about a company. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Does everybody understand their contribution and their role in there? And we need to support them. And it's
Tony Robbins, I remember reading about this concept he has of pain versus pleasure. And when you were telling the story about getting to the rink, but the door's closed. But what came to my mind is the pain of taking the next steps to call someone, to find someone, isn't worth the pleasure of playing the game of hockey for that guy.
Yeah.
It's more painful, so I'd rather quit. I'd
Mm-hmm.
rather be like, oh, well, we got this far. I'm gonna go back home now, right?
Yeah.
Like the pain is too high there,
Mm-hmm.
and I think like you said, like if you can step back and you can see like that goal that you're driving towards, right? That thing that I'm owning, right? Like we use the physical example, the house, but you can use more the abstract example of it's a task, it's a value,
Yeah.
it's a concept, it's an idea that I'm like driving in the world.
Yeah.
And if you can see whatever that goal is that you want to drive on that abstract concept, well, then you can grab it, right? And then you can mold it, because that's what's so nice about ownership is like, even just that example you said is like, well, now I actually am grabbing the hockey game and I'm molding it into something.
Yeah.
I get to pick and choose who comes to play. I get to be able to say, like, we're playing at this time on this day. I'm molding that concept, that idea into something that's mine. And that's where I think that third level really comes from, is when you mold it into something that you're proud of. And then taking that accountability and pushing on that concept is so much easier because you molded it.
Yeah, and in that example I gave, so if you sit down and think about, quote, the leadership, if the next time we got to that, and probably equally to not playing because the door was locked, it was his reaction. Like, he was defeated, and it was like, and I'm like, and no ownership. Well, it's not me, it's the city that didn't open it, and it was like, well, no, like you're the one that's supposed to be courting. So the idea is that take that over, that's fine. But then when we get to the next time the door is locked, it isn't, well, I don't know what it is. It's no, let's solve it, right? So it's this idea that, imagine like, not the old sort of proverbial group of people with pitchforks are all mad and you're at the front of them, they're coming to get you or get the thing. So the idea is that you have to be able to handle that and say, you know what, if I fully understand that it could be me next time that the door's closed, but I definitely won't have his reaction, which was defeat and blame everybody else, instead of saying, well, let's solve this thing.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think of it as a scale. Like if you think of ownership as a scale instead of these three levels, well, at what point on the scale, if I'm moving from left to right on the scale, what point do I stop because it gets hard? At what point do I start deflecting or pointing at the city, pointing at these other things because it gets hard? And at what point do I just decide to keep going?
100%. And if we go back to your supervisor, to your example, a lot of time on that spectrum, people like the idea of it. That guy probably liked the idea of he was running everything until it didn't. Then it was, oh boy. And then your supervisor, same thing. I like to be the supervisor. But all of a sudden you put my name on it and want me to be accountable and people aren't going to like me. Wait a minute here. The supervisor doesn't seem to be that as attractive, right? So very interesting that we always push forward and say, I like the idea of the role, but then what happens when we live it? We don't like the other side of it. And it's just saying those ones, that's the nature of the beast, if that makes sense. So it's very interesting along that spectrum how I believe that what happens is the title supersedes us on the spectrum, and then we get to it, and then we decide, in this example, the supervisor, we decide by our actions, and not really whether we qualify for that title. So the question I'd ask you is, do you believe the supervisor was qualified to be a supervisor by his actions? Question mark.
Not in that case.
Exactly, right? So, right? Now you could say, well, what about me and my action, my ownership? But last time, no, you weren't the supervisor and you weren't the safety man. So,
Yeah,
so right? So
I wasn't qualified to be a supervisor.
Well, right. So those titles were there. So it's very interesting how those titles they have, but then, right? So I'm not saying that you're inexcusable about their actions in terms of ownership, but the point is they are further on the spectrum. That's what they're supposed to be able to deal with, and it was very interesting.
Because that's the role, right? That's
Right.
the expectation that you put
100%.
on yourself. And that's the thing that you sign up for too.
That's what they forget.
I'm signing up to be the supervisor, which comes out for X amount of ownership.
Right, and what they think is I'm signing up to be the supervisor, which gives me that much what I call glory, status, all the stuff. That's what I'm signing up for. I'm not signing up to have people not like me. So that's the thing. They love that role. And go back to my brother in that superintendent job, there was the title, but he was conscious of the fact that this is what would come with it. See, the supervisor didn't seem to think. They used to love me, now they don't. Well, as soon as you take that role, that's part of it. Like, that's the nature of the beast. As soon as you got elected captain on your hockey team, there would be people initially on the team that weren't pleased because they thought it would be Johnny, it could have been myself, whoever it was. They could have thought, right? But then your job is to close that gap and make it so that they respect you. They don't have to like you all the time, because those are two different worlds, right? Otherwise, for instance, you're always never making a decision. If the person comes up and says, I need this, and you go, well, I know that's against what we want, but I want them to like me. So you go, yes, well, pretty soon, the animals are running the zoo, if that makes sense. So it's about respect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as we kind of wrap here, I think for everyone or anyone who's listening is to think about like ownership in your own life, to think about like, what area are we renting ownership? What area in our lives did we actually take on a role of ownership? And are we doing it for the status? Are we doing it for the responsibility? Are we doing it because we want to do it? And taking that objective look at ownership in your own life and saying, why did you sign up for it? And to think too, just as a thought experiment, is if you got put into a room and there was 10 people, where would you rise to the top? Like, the idea is to think about the situation, right? Like, what situation would it be if you got put into a room with 10 people that you would just naturally rise to the top? Because that's a great place for you to drive or build the environment, or see if you can put yourself in an environment like that. And to be conscious of the downside of more ownership, like you said. Mm-hmm. It's like in that situation where he didn't take the job, he was conscious of the responsibility and the decisions that had to come with that level of ownership. 100%. And if that level of ownership ties to the values and ties to the conviction of what you're trying to build, then it's easier to take some of that downside, because it's not saying it's going to be easy. It's not saying it's always going to be a joy. Like, there are going to be times where you have to make a decision and you know that people aren't going to be happy and it's not going to feel good. But if you have the conviction in what that thing that you're doing, it'll allow you to drive past that hard point to bring the team together.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. Good fun. Yeah.
Anchors up! Time to set sail.